Hey everyone, and welcome back to US History Notes channel. Today, we're retaking a deep dive into one of the most transformative periods in American history. The 3 decades from 1910 to 1940. This wasn't just a block of time. It was a roller coaster of incredible highs and devastating lows that completely reshaped the United States and its place in the world. So, buckle up, because we're about to journey through an era of invention, war, prosperity, and hardship. Let's start in 1910. The US was still largely an agrarian society, but the winds of change were blowing fiercely. The Second Industrial Revolution was in full swing. Cities like New York, Chicago, and Detroit were exploding in size, becoming magnets for people seeking work and a new way of life. Immigrants were pouring in primarily from Southern and Eastern Europe, adding their cultures, foods, and languages to the great American melting pot. Ellis Island was the gateway to a dream, though the reality for many was tough. Living in crowded tenements and working long hours in factories for low wages. Life was being revolutionized by technology. Henry Ford had introduced the Model T a couple of years earlier, but it was in this decade that his assembly line truly got going, making cars affordable for the average family. Suddenly, the country felt smaller. People could travel like never before, leading to the rise of suburbs and a new sense of freedom. At home, electricity was becoming more common, powering new inventions like washing machines and vacuum cleaners that promised to ease the burden of domestic work. It was an age of optimism, a time when progress felt unstoppable, but this optimism was soon overshadowed by events across the Atlantic. In 1914, World War I erupted in Europe. For 3 years, America, under President Woodrow Wilson, maintained a policy of neutrality. But that became impossible to sustain. German submarine warfare, culminating in the sinking of the Lusitania, and the infamous Zimmermann telegram, which proposed a German-Mexican alliance against the US, pushed the nation to its breaking point. In April 1917, the United States declared war on Germany. Over 2 million American soldiers, known as doughboys, were sent to fight on the Western Front. Their arrival tipped the balance of power, helping the Allies secure victory in 1918. The war effort had a massive impact back home. The economy was mobilized for wartime production. Women entered the workforce in unprecedented numbers, taking on jobs in factories and farms that had been vacated by men. This experience was a major catalyst for the women's suffrage movement, which achieved its goal with the passage of the 19th Amendment in 1920, finally giving women the right to vote. The war also sparked the Great Migration, as hundreds of thousands of African Americans moved from the rural South to northern cities, seeking economic opportunities and escaping racial segregation. The end of the war ushered in a new era, the Roaring Twenties, and roar it did. This was the Jazz Age, a decade of rebellion against tradition, fueled by post-war prosperity and a desire to live life to the fullest. The economy boomed, the stock market soared. For the first time, many Americans had disposable income and they spent it on new consumer goods like radios, refrigerators, and of course, automobiles. Culture was electric. Jazz music, born in the African American communities of New Orleans, became the soundtrack of the decade, played in speakeasies across the country. These secret bars popped up in response to Prohibition, the nationwide ban on the sale and production of alcohol that began in 1920. Instead of curbing drinking, Prohibition drove it underground, creating a massive black market and fueling the rise of organized crime figures like Al Capone. Flappers, with their short hair, short dresses, and independent attitudes, became the symbol of the new woman. They challenged Victorian norms, smoking, drinking, and dancing the Charleston with abandon. In Harlem, a cultural renaissance was blooming. As black artists, writers, and musicians like Langston Hughes and Duke Ellington created powerful works that celebrated African American identity. It was a dizzying, exciting, and sometimes chaotic time to be alive. It felt like the party would never end. But it did. On October 29, 1929, a day that would forever be known as Black Tuesday, the stock market crashed. The speculative bubble that had fueled the decade's prosperity burst spectacularly. Billions of dollars in wealth vanished in a matter of hours. This wasn't just a Wall Street problem. It was the trigger for the Great Depression, the most severe economic downturn in modern history. The 1930s were a stark and brutal contrast to the decade before. As businesses failed, unemployment skyrocketed, reaching a staggering 25% by 1933. Millions of people lost their jobs, their homes, and their savings. Breadlines and soup kitchens became common sights in every city. In the rural heartland, a severe drought combined with poor farming practices created the Dust Bowl. Massive dust storms, known as black blizzards, buried farms and homes, forcing hundreds of thousands of families, nicknamed Okies, to abandon their land and migrate west, most famously to California, in search of work that often wasn't there. The despair was palpable. Families were torn apart by the economic strain. The American dream seemed to have died. President Herbert Hoover, who initially believed in a hands-off approach, became a symbol of the government's failure to respond to the crisis. Shantytowns, made of cardboard and scrap metal, mockingly called Hoovervilles, sprang up on the outskirts of cities. Then, in 1932, America elected a new leader who promised a change: Franklin Delano Roosevelt. In his inaugural address, he famously told the nation, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." Roosevelt's charisma and confidence were exactly what the country needed. He promised a new deal for the American people, a sweeping series of programs and reforms aimed at providing relief, recovery, and reform. The New Deal fundamentally changed the relationship between the government and its citizens. In his first 100 days, Roosevelt launched a dizzying array of initiatives. The Civilian Conservation Corps put millions of young men to work on environmental projects. The Public Works Administration built dams, bridges, hospitals, and schools, creating jobs and modernizing the nation's infrastructure. The Tennessee Valley Authority brought electricity and economic development to one of the country's poorest regions. Perhaps most importantly, the New Deal created a social safety net. The Social Security Act of 1935 established a system of retirement pensions, unemployment insurance, and aid for the disabled and dependent children. It was a landmark piece of legislation that continues to be a cornerstone of American society today. While the New Deal did unsingle-handedly end the Great Depression, many economists argue it was the massive government spending for World War II that truly did that. It provided crucial relief and, just as importantly, restored a sense of hope to millions of Americans. It established the idea that the federal government has a responsibility to protect the welfare of its people. As the 1930s drew to a close, the world was once again on the brink of war. Fascism was rising in Europe, and Japan was expanding its empire in Asia, while America was still grappling with its own economic problems. And a strong isolationist sentiment, it was becoming clear that the nation couldn't remain detached from the growing global conflict forever. The decade ended with the invasion of Poland in 1939, plunging Europe into World War II. The United States, though officially neutral, began to prepare for the inevitable, shifting its industrial might towards producing arms and supplies for the Allied nations. So, there you have it. From 1910 to 1940, America went from an emerging industrial power to a global leader. It experienced the optimism of the progressive era, the trauma of a world war, the wild excesses of the Roaring Twenties, and the crushing despair of the Great Depression. It was a period of profound social change, technological revolution, and economic turmoil that forged the modern America we know today. The challenges were immense, but so was the resilience of the American people. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this journey through history interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the past. Let me know in the comments which historical period you'd like to see covered next. Until then, take care.